Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod, episode number 63. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We are fast approaching, a lot of things. First of all, next week is the Super Bowl, so I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about there with the trailers that are going to be coming out. It'll be a jam-packed episode for next week, and we have a segment in here in this week's episode just predicting some of the Super Bowl trailers. I know that there are some confirmations and there are some reports out there, but, I thought it'd be fun still to take my best stab at all of the Super Bowl trailers coming out. And then the week after is Captain America Brave New World. So lots and lots and lots of stuff coming up, guys. We have TV shows, Daredevil, Born Again, and whatnot, but also we have TV shows going on right now. I am doing a spoiler discussion of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, the first two episodes in this episode, which you'd be surprised actually what I thought about it. Maybe you're not, based on what I've said before. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining us again this week. As always, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like if you are watching on YouTube, if that is your preferred platform to check out the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Leave a comment down below with any of your thoughts on any of the topics that we discuss. And we also have audio-only platforms. We have Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast, and hopefully many more in the future. So if you are interested in just having it on an audio platform, all available for you to enjoy there. Let me know what you think about those audio platforms. Leave a rating. And yeah, guys, that will do it for the intro. Let's get into this week's topics. Alrighty, guys, so the Agatha All Along Season 2 saga continues. We have been covering for a few months now the ups and downs of whether or not Agatha Season 2 is going to happen. First, we've gotten comments from Jack Schaefer, we've gotten multiple comments from Catherine Hahn, and of course Marvel, I think infamously now, had entered Agatha All Along to Emmy's consideration, and I believe Golden Globes consideration as well, as not being a limited series anymore, which limited series meaning just, contained to one season, but now being labeled as Season 1, which seems to indicate that Agatha Season 2 is going to happen, which would make sense because Agatha All Along was one of the more critically well-received shows. And unlike shows like WandaVision, for example, which just didn't really have a reason to do a season 2 because it was just a pretty open and shut case of a single season, Agatha All Along very clearly seemed like it wanted to have a season 2, or at least have the story continue on in another fashion. But, I think season 2 seemed likely just because also, like I said, it was a well-received show, and it seemed like the viewership was going up throughout its entire run. So recently, Patti LuPone, who played, I believe the character's name is Lilia, Lilia Calderu in Agatha All Along. She also appeared in WandaVision briefly as well. I believe. I could be wrong about that. No, I might be wrong about that. But anyways, she was speaking about WandaVision, which is why I got confused. And she gave a quote here that seems to pour some cold water on the idea that Agatha All Along is going to get a season 2. I'm going to explain why I still think Agatha Season 2 is going to happen, but maybe now not in the way that we might have originally thought. So this is Patti LuPone, and this is her quote. Quote, Jack Schaefer, the creator, came into my trailer, and she said, Patti, I'm just here to tell you that Lilia is going to die. She died in episode 7 of Agatha All Along. And I went, but I wanted a second season. Schaefer said, I don't do second seasons. She said, they wanted me to do a second season of WandaVision, and I didn't. She said, there's too much to write, and so she does one-offs, and I'm really hoping and praying that someday I get to work with her again because she's magic. Haha, get it? Magic pun. Okay, so a couple of things to note here, right? Because at first I read this quote, and the first thing that jumped out to me is that, Patti LuPone says Agatha All Along doesn't get a second season, but not because it's not going to get a second season, but because her character died. So maybe, really what she meant was, I'm not appearing in Agatha Season 2 because the character is dead. But then you read the second half of the quote, and the second half is honestly what's more interesting to me. The second half is that Jack Schaefer does not seem to be willing to do any second season. And also, there's a little nugget in there that apparently, WandaVision was going to get a second season, which, I don't know. Maybe Marvel wanted to do some kind of follow-up, but then I feel like they had plans for Elizabeth Olsen very early on to be a part of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and maybe the plan was to do WandaVision Season 2 afterwards with her and White Vision, and maybe she was originally going to survive Doctor Strange 2. I don't know. Plans may have changed. So I feel like the WandaVision Season 2 maybe isn't as big of a headline as we might think. It's not, it's not as consequential, I think, at the end of the day. And so I think really what we want to hone in on here is the fact that, Patti LuPone says Agatha All Along Season 2 is not going to happen because Jack Schaefer just doesn't do Season 2. Here's the thing. I think, and whether or not you think this is right or wrong, it's totally fair, totally up to you. I still think regardless of if Jack Schaefer comes in and returns to do Agatha All Along Season 2, Agatha All Along Season 2 is going to happen. I think for a couple of reasons. Number one, for as good of a showrunner as Jack Schaefer is, because I love WandaVision. I think WandaVision is one of the greatest things the MCU has ever done, and she was behind that. She was amazing. She was just she did a great job shepherding that series. And I didn't love Agatha all along, especially the middle parts, but the ending really picked it up. And she knows how to tell a good story. So I would be sad to hear if Jack Schaefer didn't come back for an Agatha all along season 2. I don't think, though, that Jack Schaefer is the sole reason that Agatha all along, and I'm not talking about WandaVision, just her whole body of work, but I'm just talking about Agatha all along specifically. I'm not sure that she's the only reason that a show revolving around the character of Agatha Harkness could work. In fact, I actually am kind of convinced that maybe even the second season needs to go in a different direction, because the second season can't rely on some of the things that she likes to do. Jack Schaefer is very much an episodic television show maker, which is totally fine. It's great. It worked great in WandaVision, and it worked pretty well in certain parts in Agatha all along. She's very episodic, right? And what she also likes to do a lot is subvert genre. So she likes to, in each individual episode, she likes to play a parody on something and all that kind of stuff. She's done 2 seasons now, WandaVision and Agatha all along, and that's really been one of the calling cards for Jack Schaefer. And I think with this second chapter now, if they do an Agatha all along season 2, it's going to be a different story, right? It's not, you can't really go back to that well anymore unless they do something really weird. And at that point, maybe it just feels really forced. At this point, we have Agatha, Ghost Agatha, and Billy looking for Tommy, right? And that seems more of an adventure plot or something different. Not to say that Jack Schaefer couldn't do a good job with that. Of course she could. She's a great storyteller. But I think that just by saying Jack Schaefer is not going to return for Agatha all along season 2, which, by the way, people change their minds all the time. I don't remember exactly who said this, but there have been many directors who are like, I'm going to retire. Just kidding. I'm back. I think even Quentin Tarantino has gone back and forth on this many, many times. Different people are just like, I'm retiring. I'm unretiring. I think Jim Carrey was going to retire at one point. Then he did Sonic 3, and he's probably going to be back for Sonic 4. So, people say things, right? And not to say that Jack Schaefer doesn't believe this in her heart, but, what if she gets inspiration for a really good idea for Agatha all along season 2? Because I get it. It takes a long time to write. I get it. But if she gets that spark, who's to say that it doesn't motivate her to say, I'm going to do it. And I think that Agatha All Along Season 2 is going to happen. I think that Agatha All Along Season 2, whether it's in the multiverse saga, mutant saga, whatever, can just fit in the MCU in this world, And there are going to be ties. One of the next shows coming up after Daredevil Born Again, Ironheart, Wonder Man is going to be the Vision show. And so I'm sure that the Vision show will have at least some ramifications that would lead into an Agatha All Along Season 2. And maybe even Agatha Harkness herself and Billy show up in the Vision series, which we've been speculating on. So, to me, I get it. I'd be sad if Jack Schaefer didn't return for Agatha All Along Season 2. I don't think it's the end of the world, and I don't think by any means it means that Agatha All Along Season 2 is not going to happen. I still am very much on the side at this point that Agatha All Along Season 2 will happen, and I'm not even someone who loved the show. I like the show a decent bit, but I think that it's just, you can't ignore the fact that this show was one of the more successful Disney Plus shows that the MCU has ever made. And I think, honestly, Kevin Feige might be a little foolish if he doesn't greenlight a season 2. We'll see. But I have my doubts that even if Jack Schaefer leaves, that the show is not going to happen. So, guys, what do you think about these comments from Patty Lapone? Do you think that this confirms Agatha All Along Season 2 is not going to happen, or do you think it's still going to happen anyways, even if she doesn't return to be the showrunner? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, thus is the life of a weekly podcaster. Basically what happened was I clicked upload on my podcast in the afternoon around Friday, and then right as I did that, a couple hours later, I saw the news that the DCU's Lanterns had cast their villain. So unfortunately, this segment and this, in the podcast will be out. The news will be out at least here a little bit later than I would have liked, because it's just how the schedule works, but still wanted to talk about it because it's interesting news. So, Lanterns. We've talked about the casting saga of Lanterns. It went from Josh Brolin, and, we had Kyle Chandler officially cast, and then Aaron Pierre cast as Jon Stewart, and so all these different things going on. And, this series looks like it's really heading towards production quite soon, which is exciting. It's a really exciting thing. But then, we haven't heard too much about it since then, other than it's getting going. And so now we officially have our casting for Sinestro. And, I don't generally cover every single casting for all these DC or Marvel or Star Wars movies, but I mean, these are big ones, right? Like we talked about the casting for the Supergirl villain creme of the Yellow Hills, even though I didn't know the actor or the character that well, but it's significant, right? You know, you cast the main villain of these projects. So I think that that's exciting, like Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. And now Sinestro, you know, allegedly, according to Deadline, because Deadline, again, is one of the more reputable sources. And so when Deadline reports this, I take this to the bank that, you know, Sinestro is going to be the villain of the Lanterns series. Now, it's interesting because Sinestro, arguably, is the most, you know, well-known Green Lantern villain. I think Mark Strong, right? Mark Strong was Sinestro in the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie, a film that I personally have not seen. But, you know, it's interesting because it's like, and again, if you're a big comic book fan and I'm getting all this wrong, you more than welcome to correct me here. But I'm assuming that Sinestro to Green Lantern is sort of like the Lex Luthor to Superman, or maybe even the Joker to Batman. You know, like the big villain, right? The big villain that everyone kind of associates with the Lanterns. And it's interesting to me that they're going here because, so first of all, just the casting news in general, because I don't know this actor super well, but his name is Ulrich, I don't know how to pronounce it, Ulrich Thomsen. And he was from Counterpart and The Blacklist. The Blacklist is a show that I know more. I haven't seen The Blacklist myself, but I've heard very good things about it. And he's going to be playing Sinestro. And, you know, like I was saying, it's interesting that they're going here with the big villain first, right? Because I think it's a statement. Because let's be honest, right? And I think I can say this safely. You know, I talk about all the time that, you know, movies and TV shows are your own experiences, and however you feel about it, it's great. Totally great. But you know, I think even Ryan Reynolds, the Green Lantern himself, the only other, you know, notable big blockbuster live action Hal Jordan Green Lantern, would tell you that there has also been no notable live action Green Lantern that has been done really well. And so this is really the first big introduction of the Lanterns to the pop culture zeitgeist that James Gunn is hoping to at least make a good impression with. It's almost like Fantastic Four in a similar way, where there just hasn't been a good Fantastic Four movie out there. And with this Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, Evan Moss-Baccarat, and Joseph Quinn iteration, I think that Marvel is really hoping to, you know, finally do it justice. And I think that Lanterns is a similar thing for DC. And so tapping the big villain, I think it's actually, there are a lot more parallels between these two projects than one might think, because, you know, I was kind of thinking, oh, is Fantastic Four going to kind of stay away from Doom? And then, you know, we heard the news that Doom was going to be the big villain of the multiverse saga in general, which is crazy. But I was like, okay, so then if they're going to stay away from Doom, presumably, are they going to, you know, stay away from Silver Surfer or Galactus? Because those are the big Fantastic Four villains. Nope. They're going right in with Galactus and Silver Surfer. Not the traditional, you know, male Silver Surfer rather, but the newer, I think she's a newer version of Silver Surfer. Shia LaBeouf, I believe, is the character's name, so played by Julia Garner. So it's interesting because Marvel is taking that approach. They're going for it, right, with this first Fantastic Four, because I think the idea here with Lanterns and with Fantastic Four First Steps is that you got to make a good impression, right? It's your chance to really cement these characters in the pop culture zeitgeist in a way that is lasting and positive, unlike the previous iteration. So I think it's really cool. You know, they're going with Sinestro here. I don't know too much about Sinestro other than the classic. You know, he was once a Green Lantern, you know, and he was corrupted. I know there's way more to the character than that, but it's a very classic villain trope, and it's a very well used villain trope. And so I'm very curious to see how they're going to play it here, especially with the idea that Lanterns is going to be more of a detective series. And so I'm very curious to see, you know, how he's going to be the villain. Now, I should say, I don't think he is going to be, you know, because this Deadline article doesn't say he is the villain, right, of Lanterns. Who knows what kind of role he's going to play, because, you know, the show is going to follow Jon Stewart and Hal Chandler, I almost said, Hal Jordan investigating a murder. So we'll see how Sinestro plays into that. But, you know, one would assume, because the article says he's playing supervillain Sinestro. And I don't know many comic book runs, you can let me know in the comments, but where Sinestro is working with the Lantern. So we'll see. You know, we'll have to see about that. But guys, what do you think about the casting of Ulrich Thomsen as Sinestro, and what do you think about Sinestro being at least a prominent character in the Lanterns series? I would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below. Alright guys, as Daredevil Born Again approaches, which is so exciting, who would have thought in 2025 we would be getting essentially the fourth season to one of the best superhero shows I've ever seen, Daredevil. The initial Daredevil, the 3-season run. I loved that show. I even really liked the Defenders, because I'm going to be honest, I didn't really watch any of the other shows in conjunction with Daredevil, or in the Defenders universe, but I watched Daredevil 1, Daredevil 2, and then Defenders, and then Daredevil 3. I love those 4 seasons together. I think that they were great. So, you know, in a world where Alfred Molina, Willem Dafoe, Jamie Foxx came back for Spider-Man No Way Home, in a world where Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield came back for Spider-Man No Way Home, in a world where Patrick Stewart came back for Doctor Strange 2, and in a world, of course, where Hugh Jackman came back for Deadpool and Wolverine. Anything is possible. But Charlie Cox coming back for Daredevil First in Spider-Man No Way Home as Matt Murdock, then in She-Hulk Attorney at Law, then a little bit in Echo, and now finally in Daredevil Born Again is such an exciting thing. It is so exciting. And they're ramping up the press. And now we're getting a lot of interesting quotes here. I'm not going to go through every single little thing that the showrunner and Charlie Cox have been talking about, but there are a couple that I did want to touch on here. The headline for this segment is obviously about She-Hulk, which we'll get to, but he also has been talking about some other things here. And I'm not going to read every single direct quote, but I'm going to touch on a couple other things that I find very interesting. The showrunner's name, by the way, his name is Dario Scardapane. I think I'm terrible at pronouncing names, as you guys know by now. Dario Scardapane. And so he's been, touching on a lot of different aspects of the show. So first of all, what he said, and I'm not going to read the direct quotes here, but he's talked about the fact that they're actually going to go much darker than the Netflix version, which is interesting because the Netflix version is pretty dark to begin with. So whatever that means, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you, but we'll have to see what that looks like as well. And then, they talk about the fact that this has been well documented by now, that Daredevil Born Again, originally an 18-episode season, was going to be more of a procedural, even a lawyer crime or courtroom kind of procedural, and it just wasn't working, And so Charlie Cox, I believe the word that he or the showrunner used was U-turn. They did a U-turn, basically. And they talk about that. And I think that that's interesting in its own right. Maybe eventually we can talk about that, especially once we see the show. And maybe if we see the show, we can be like, oh, yeah, like that, definitely kind of seems like they course corrected for the better. There are a couple things, though, that I wanted to touch on here specifically. A couple direct quotes that the showrunner has been giving. The latter one is about She-Hulk, obviously, and Daredevil's place with She-Hulk. And I think it touches on some interesting things about the collaborative and maybe even restrictive nature of working within the MCU. But I also wanted to touch on this quote first. Because he, in this interview, the Scardapane is talking about, the MCU and how Daredevil Born Again is connected to the MCU, but they wanted to tell their own story. And so he says, I'm going to read this first quote here, and we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to talk about the She-Hulk stuff. So this first quote says, quote, "They've moved Matt through other corners of the MCU, and now he's back in his own story. I don't want to give anything away, but you're going to see a character in our show you never thought you would. But they get folded into the story in a manner that is organic and exists in our world. New York, in the current state of the MCU, has a lot of stuff going on." Okay, so I think that that's interesting. And actually, a lot of people seem to be pointing to the fact that we might actually know who this character is. There was a rumor, and I don't know if this rumor was directly corroborated by any of the major sources, but it seemed like it was a big enough rumor that it's, there's enough credence to it, that Tony Dalton's Swordsmaster, Jack Duquesne, in Hawkeye, is going to be making an appearance in the show. So people have been thinking that's a random MCU character that might have some ties here. Let's face it, right? His were they married? I don't remember. His ex-wife or ex-fiance Eleanor Bishop was working for Kingpin, so there is actually a connection there if you think about it. Not to mention the fact that he's in New York supposedly. Maybe Kate Bishop shows up. I don't know. Could happen. So I think that is definitely a possibility. There could be other possibilities as well. Doesn't seem like it's She-Hulk. Doesn't seem like it's Spider-Man. But, there's a possibility there. I want to then talk about the She-Hulk stuff, and then we'll talk about all this holistically, and why I think that, at first I was a little sad, honestly, and a little worried that this director was like, yeah, I don't really care about the MCU. That was my thought at first. Like, is that what he's saying? Is he saying, look, Daredevil is in his show, and we don't really care about the MCU. We just want to make our own thing? And I think the answer is no. Honestly, I think the answer is no. I think that first quote kind of corroborates that and says, yeah, we're thinking about the MCU. But then the second quotes that I'm about to read here kind of indicate that, but we really wanted to focus on Matt and his story. So let's read the second set of quotes here about Daredevil, and it relates to She-Hulk as well. So, quote, "Marvel has a master plan, and what you're doing causes ripple effects. I would pitch the show, or I would pitch stuff very early, and I would hear that they had other plans. I have plenty of leeway up until I hit the larger scale plan for the MCU, so I try to ignore some stuff from the wider universe. We establish a very specific Daredevil, both in terms of his dilemma, down to the suit, and where we're picking him up in his life. You can say that Daredevil is canon in the MCU. Those other events in Spider-Man and She-Hulk happened, but some of them we are not leading into. His one-night stand with She-Hulk may be one of those things." Okay, so I have mentioned before that one of the things I would actually, I actually would have liked to have seen is a reference to She-Hulk. I actually even speculated when I did my trailer breakdown or trailer reaction to the first trailer for Daredevil Born Again. I was like, what if Tatiana Maslany just shows up as Jennifer Walters and has a little cameo in the show? That doesn't seem like it's happening. And I was a little sad at first. And I honestly, like I said, a little bit worried because I was like, is the showrunner just basically saying, I don't really care about the MCU? Because look, I love Daredevil. And I love the fact that it was pretty isolated from the rest of, everything else going on. But Daredevil is in the MCU now. And I think that it's not an either or, right? You don't have to just do a completely isolated Daredevil or a Daredevil that only shows up when the Avengers show up. It's not an either or. You can have both. And that's what's exciting to me about that. And I'm all for focusing on consistency of story, quality of story. And Daredevil Born Again looks very standalone, from what I see. And that's great. That is awesome, right? Like, Daredevil Born Again does not need to be the Captain America Civil War of the Disney Plus MCU shows. It just doesn't, right? And it doesn't need to be a Thunderbolts. It doesn't need to be, a Cap 4 where Red Hulk is showing up and Leader and whatnot. It doesn't have to be. It can be a Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock story. That's great. But also, I think just to outright ignore everything else that came before, it feels a little disingenuous to me, honestly. And so that was what I was thinking going into this, because again, headlines can be deceiving. And the headlines going around, I think, were something like, well, She-Hulk not going to be in Daredevil Born Again. And I was like, uh-oh. And I think after hearing the explanation here, I think it's fine, because what I'm getting from Scarlet Pain is that no, he actually has a very good understanding of the fact that this is a Daredevil who, yes, is in his own corner of the world, much like how after the Avengers, Iron Man would go off and do Iron Man 3, Thor would go off and do Thor the Dark World, much to the chagrin of many audience members who were like, there's a giant spaceship in the middle of London, why aren't the Avengers there? Captain America would do his own thing, and then they would all come back together. And obviously Captain America had, Black Widow in it, and Iron Man 3 had a credit scene with Hulk or with Bruce Banner. So again, these individual projects had understandings that they were part of the MCU while telling their own stories. And that's what I would love Daredevil Born Again to do, is go back to the roots of the original series while understanding that it's still in the MCU. It's totally fine. She-Hulk does not need to be in Daredevil Born Again. I also, though, on the flip side, I'm like, well, why don't, what's the harm in referencing it in a one-line little thing? Like, Daredevil's talking to Foggy, and Foggy's like, hey, so what have you been up to? And he's like, yeah, I took a trip to New York or to LA, and I met a girl, thought it would work out, didn't really work out. Like, there's no harm in doing that. But again, whatever. It's whatever if they don't want to address it. But I think the fact that the showrunner is like, no, we are going to have some characters from the MCU, or at least a character from the MCU show up here, and we're just not going to ignore everything that goes on. And there are constraints, right? There are those constraints of, hey, I wanted to do some things, but it was going to butt up in the plans of the wider MCU, so I didn't. And we ended up making a great show. I think is actually encouraging. It shows that there is still a collaboration going on at Marvel. And yeah, I mean, maybe it's restrictive, but it's only restrictive, I think, insofar as it just doesn't work. Like, if Daredevil Born Again comes out and it's terrible, and then the showrunner comes out and he's like, yeah, I wanted to do a bunch of stuff and they just wouldn't let me. Again, I think it's just a case-by-case basis. So I'm excited for Daredevil Born Again still. A little bummed that we won't even be getting a reference to She-Hulk, which, I don't know, one line would have been fine. But again, I think it's still encouraging that the showrunner seems to get it, that this is a show that takes place in the MCU, but it's going to be very much its own thing. I think that is very, very exciting as well. So what do you think about these comments here that, we're not going to be referencing Spider-Man No Way Home or She-Hulk Attorney at Law in terms of Daredevil? Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, so a series that I certainly was not looking forward to was Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man just a month ago. 1 month ago, if you had asked me, hey, what's your anticipation level for Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, I would have said out of, 10, maybe a 2. I just really was not interested in this series. Not because I don't love Spider-Man. In fact, Spider-Man is one of my favorite characters, fictional characters of all time. I love Spider-Man. I love Tom Holland as Spider-Man. Spider-Man Homecoming, amazing. I think Spider-Man Far From Home, severely underrated by MCU fans, and Spider-Man No Way Home was obviously awesome. I love Andrew, I love Tobey in their own ways. I like the animated Spider-Verse films a decent bit, not as much as everyone else, but Spider-Man, he's my guy. Love Spider-Man. But this Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man just didn't look interesting to me. It looked kind of cheap, the animation style. I mean, sure, it looked kind of interesting in terms of just the stylistic elements, but just the functionality of the animation just didn't look super appealing to me, and then just the trailers made it look kind of cheesy and corny and almost like it was a kid's show in a weird way, so I really wasn't excited. But then we talked about the first reviews coming out, the first reactions rather coming out of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. They were overwhelmingly positive. And so again, I mean, I am always somebody who says, I've said this many, many times on this channel, I go into any project, no matter how uninterested, unenthused I am about the project, I go into every single one with an open mind, because if I end up liking the project, then that's a win for me. And if I don't, well, that's what it is, right? But if I don't like the project, then it's just, my expectations were met. But if I do, keeping an open mind, that's just a huge win for me. Those are the best kinds of things. And so hearing those good reactions, hearing those good reviews, I was like, okay, let's give it a shot. Now, I am going to do spoiler discussions for Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I'm not going to go as in-depth as I did with Agatha All Along, with Penguin, Rings of Power. I'm not going to make these like 20-minute, segments in the podcast. But I'm going to just briefly talk about each episode, and then I'll obviously give my overall thoughts. So this is going to be a spoiler discussion for the first 2 episodes of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. If you haven't seen them, just make sure to come back once you have. Let's talk about them in spoiler details. Guys, this show is way better than it has any right to be. Is it perfect? No, I don't think so. Is it good? Yeah, it's good. I was, again, this is one of those pleasant surprises where I go, hey, I had zero expectation for it. Something like a Lego movie, for example, just really didn't like the trailer. I thought, what's the point of this, right? I literally said, what's the point of this? Not to say that, look, out of all the animated projects that they've done, they've made 3 seasons of What If that I just really haven't liked. So it's not to diminish that whole point that I was making in the previous segment, or in the previous episode where I was talking about Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, where I was saying I just wish that it feels like they're just throwing a lot of spaghetti against the wall. But luckily, this strand has stuck, and by they I mean the Marvel Animation division. But this strand, it's stuck. I really like this. So let's go through the first couple episodes, just give some overall thoughts, going into a couple details here and there, and then we'll talk about the series as a whole, or the first 2 episodes as a whole, rather. So what I really like is that they, in the first episode, they start out here, they're using the same font as Civil War. So you're already getting set up that this is not the MCU, but it's sort of adjacent to it. I was wondering how much they were going to go into that, and we get into that much, or not much later, but towards the end of the episode. I really like the dynamic between May and Peter. I think that it's really cute. And then we get this sort of battle with this weird Venom creature. I thought it was actually going to be the Chitauri from 2012. It seems like they're always going back to that, but it's just this giant Venom creature and Strange. Is it a multiverse Strange? Is it a multiverse Venom? I have no idea. No clue. Guess it doesn't really matter. And then he gets bitten by a multiverse spider. And honestly, that was one of the parts of the show that I was a little underwhelmed by. I was like, really? I get it. We don't really have time. We don't really need to go through his whole spider bite thing, but just a random spider from the sky and he gets bit by it? Okay, whatever. And so, I think at the beginning of the show, I was just like, how seriously does the show want us to take it? And it didn't seem like it wanted us to take it very seriously, because the beginning, while cute, was very goofy. And the Strange Venom fight was okay. It was fine. And it just feels like the Spider-Man from the MCU, right? That what it felt like was the Spider-Man from the MCU, the Tom Holland version, was just translated into a kiddish cartoon. And not everything about it was, kiddie, but it just kind of felt like a more Saturday morning cartoon version of the MCU Spider-Man, which it has its own charm. It has its own appeal. But yeah, I don't know. It was an interesting thing to see. Then we get to we get introduced to all of the cast of friends here. So Nico, which I really, one of the things I really liked about these first couple episodes is that the cast of friends feel just as real as they did in Spider-Man Homecoming. With Spider-Man Homecoming had MJ and Ned and Liz and Flash and all these other characters. And this one manages to introduce a lot of other characters that we don't are not the same, but just as well, just as fast. Instead of Liz, we have this girl named Pearl that he really likes. It seems like a very similar, in Spider-Man Homecoming, he liked the senior girl, and here it seems like that girl is Pearl. Nico is kind of the Ned, right? The best friend. And then we have, I guess there's no Flash parallel because Lonnie's cool. Lonnie's really cool. And, I was going through the episode and I was like, yeah, it's cute. It's fun. It feels like Homecoming, it's Spider-Man Homecoming, and I really like the friends. And then the show kind of pivots, right? Because, Peter's doing his thing. He's kind of Spider-Man-ing, and he's just being goofy and doing the whole Instagram Live thing, which I was like, whatever. It is what it is. I wasn't hating the show or anything. I just was like, yeah, it's cute. But then the show decides, hey, let's kind of grow up here a little bit. And so, as the camera follows Lonnie home, the shots where the police car is trailing him, I was like, wow, wait, this show is actually not afraid to deal with real world, just real world things. And I was like, wow, that's actually kind of cool that the show is going to do that. Like a show that is sort of feeling like it's geared towards kids in a way. I'm not saying that as a negative thing per se. I'm just saying that the whole feel kind of felt cartoonish in that way. But the show then isn't afraid to kind of dig into characters that are, he's like, hey, I'm the star quarterback, I am, I seem like I have everything together, but I'm actually, really smart, and I don't have everything together because there are a lot of things that I'm dealing with for this character of Lonnie, right? We see on the subway that the mom and her son are kind of, scared of him. And that's again, a really sad thing to see. But these are, just like how even Falcon and Winter Soldier was dealing with real world topics as well. Like when Sam got pulled over by the police car and Bucky was like, wait, he didn't do anything wrong. If you guys remember that scene from Falcon and Winter Soldier, I was really impressed that the show took the time to develop a character like Lonnie and give us, some backstory to it. And so I thought that was really, really well done. So then, we have Peter doing his Peter thing, and he's being Spider-Man, he's enjoying it, and then he goes and finds a DVD player at the dumpster. And at that point, I was like, oh yeah, cute little callback to Civil War. I like it. And then we hear that music from Civil War, and all of a sudden it clicked with me, and I was like, oh, this is Civil War. It's just going to be a little bit different. So I actually really like that because, there are multiverse versions of Spider-Man. We've seen Andrew, we've seen Tobey. I like that this is an MCU Tom Holland version of Spider-Man, just in a couple universes down, not like 50 universes down where Andrew might be from, or not 100 where Tobey might be from. This is just like a couple units down, where it's most things are similar, most things are the same. I could even imagine that up until that point, maybe the MCU Spider-Man was pretty similar. I mean, obviously he probably didn't live in a world with Oscorp and all that kind of stuff, but we saw a little keychain with Iron Man, right, on Aunt May's car. So Iron Man does exist in this world, but you can imagine that most of the things were really similar. In fact, they basically recreated the scene where Peter met Tony in Civil War with, this time, Norman Osborn. And I finished the first episode and I was like, wow, that was really good. It was shockingly good. So then we head into episode 2 here, and we have, Peter sort of, beginning to cultivate his friendship with Lonnie. He's being adored by the football players, which is really interesting. And now we get to see the internship, and we get to kind of, dig into what Norman Osborn is up to. We don't really get to, I guess, in this episode. I think that'll be a big theme in the next coming episodes, but we get to see the internship at the lab, which Norman Osborn offered Peter. And it's a Wakandan girl, Wakandan scientist, and then Amadeus Cho and another girl. So yeah, Amadeus Cho, Hulk, a version of Hulk at least, and so that's interesting. Wonder if he's going to turn into Hulk later on. Also, I should mention, by the way, I looked up a little bit about Lonnie earlier on because there are a lot of characters in this series that are allusions or references to comic book characters, and Lonnie will become a much more important character later on, as it turns out. But I'm not going to reveal that here for those of you guys who don't want to know. You guys can look it up if you do, but yeah. Speaking of important characters, though, to the lore of Spider-Man, Dr. Connors is here, which is cool. She's missing an arm, as just like the Rhys Ifans character was in Spider-Man, or The Amazing Spider-Man. So, yeah, a lot of comic book characters hanging around here. Then, there's the whole thing about Spider-Man or Peter Parker hitting it off and doing really well. But then, of course, his fatal flaw, he sees someone in trouble and he has to go save them. And he goes and fights this fire person, which I really don't know who that is. You can let me know in the comments who that character was in the comics. I'm sure that they were some important Spider-Man villain that I just don't know. But I also like how, just like with Lonnie, they're dealing with real world issues in kind of subtle ways, or not so subtle ways, but just kind of putting it in these, in these scenes. And the one that I caught here was the fact that this guy was like, yeah, I was hired to demolish and burn down buildings so that, people can build them for cheap. Whoever is hiring them. And I think that is a really interesting angle and a really interesting reflection of what people can do to manipulate the system and do all that kind of stuff. So I think, again, just really interesting stuff here. And I really think also, throughout these first 2 episodes that Hudson Thames, I believe is the actor's name who's voicing Spider-Man, does a really good approximation of Tom Holland while being unique. But, I can totally just close my eyes and be like, yeah, no, that's like, again, a version of the MCU Spider-Man that's just a couple doors down from the Earth 616, which I really like. I really, really like that. And then, at the end of the episode, of course, we reveal that Norman Osborn knows now that Spider-Man is Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And that was to be expected. That's something that we kind of saw coming at the very end of the episode. And that's it. So guys, the first 2 episodes of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, look, I'm not going to say it's the best show that's ever been made. I don't know that yet. There are things like it's still kind of, bordering on cutesy and whatever, but a good story is a good story is a good story, right? Even if at some points it's sort of, a kind of a cartoony kids show, or whatever, which I'm not saying that is a bad thing. I'm just saying that that's sort of the impression that I got from some scenes, because overall the show is still not afraid to delve into, the MCU Spider-Man. It's not afraid to delve into some deeper themes, and I think that I respect it for it. And a good story is a good story is a good story. And if they're willing to, really dive into Peter Parker as a character, just in a different universe, a different iteration of the MCU Spider-Man, I'm all down for it. I'm really excited to see what happens from here. So yeah, I mean, it's always a pleasant surprise, it's always a good thing to be pleasantly surprised, I should say, by anything where you just had no expectations for and you end up really liking it. We'll see where the show goes from here because, again, it's first 2 episodes, but I am looking forward to the next couple episodes, and we'll continue to do these spoiler discussions as long as it's fun to do. So, guys, have you seen the first 2 episodes of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and what do you think about them? Are you enjoying this show as much as I am? Because I found myself really enjoying it. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, so I was just scrolling through some news feeds the other day, looking for things to talk about, topics that would be interesting to bring up on the Access Blockbusters pod, and I came upon a little post on social media from somebody. I'm not able to confirm who it is, I forget, but the post was saying basically, look at all these shows that were, either beloved or big shows that came out in the previous couple years, and they've all been confirmed for seasons, or not season 3s, but next seasons, rather. So they're being renewed, basically. And I was just scrolling through the list, and I was like, oh yeah, Creature Commandos, we talked about that. And then I came upon Dune Prophecy. And I stopped and I said, wait a second. When did this happen? I feel like I would have heard about it. And so I was like, did I just completely miss the headlines that Dune Prophecy was renewed for season 2? I went online, and wasn't really anything. I was like, yeah, I don't think I really missed anything about Dune Prophecy. And then I found this little article, or a couple articles, talking about a quote from the star of Dune Prophecy Season 1, Emily Watson. And she, sure enough, basically confirms that Dune Prophecy Season 2 is happening. So I don't know if we've gotten official confirmation from anybody about this, but it certainly looks like Dune Prophecy is going to get a season 2. And I'm going to explain after this, after I read the quote from Emily Watson, because I always like to read exactly what people say so that we can, have all the context we need and we don't take anything out of context, no false headlines and things like that. Just want to explicitly talk about what people say. But after that, I'm going to talk about why I think it's an exciting thing. And even as somebody who didn't love season 1, but, thought it was decent. And so we'll talk about why I'm excited for season 2. So Emily Watson, who played Valia Harkonnen, the main character of the show, although there were a lot of quote-unquote main characters, and, Desmond Hart and the Emperor Carino and all that kind of stuff. So she gave a quote here, very short, a couple sentences, and she says this, quote, "I think we're going to start," and she means start filming, "in the fall. And I don't know anything about Valia's story. I know nothing. So I'm just as excited as you are." That's the quote. And that quote basically confirms that Dune Prophecy Season 2 is going to happen. Because, let's face it, if Dune Prophecy Season 2 wasn't going to happen, and the question was, oh, are you going to start filming it soon? The answer from Emily Watson or any other person in Hollywood would not be to make up the fact that they're going to start filming soon, but rather would be something like, oh, I had a really good time on Season 1, and I really hope that Season 2 is going to happen, but nothing yet. But the fact that Emily Watson feels emboldened to say, yeah, we're definitely going to be filming Season 2, and it's probably going to happen this fall, which, by the way, hints at a 2026 release date, which, is not bad. It's from late 2024 to maybe mid-2026 is not ideal because, most shows in the past have been able to churn out seasons every year. We go back to the glory days of the sitcoms. It's a season every year, which is amazing. By the way, there were basically only, 6 months out of the year where you didn't have that show on, which is awesome. But that's not happening anymore. Kind of sucks. But if you can go about a year and a half between seasons, maybe 2 years, just under 2 years, I think that's not bad. It's not bad. So anyways, Emily Watson confirming that Dune Prophecy Season 2 is probably going to happen, which is, I think a good thing in terms of the story, just because Season 1 left a lot of questions open-ended. I think, while we got a little bit of insight into Desmond Hart and the fact that there is a thinking machine in his eyeball, I guess, or in his brain or something like that. And, we got some confirmations about his parentage being Ori Atreides and Tula Harkonnen. I still think there's a lot of questions unanswered about that character. There's, frankly, a lot of storylines that just weren't picked up. I think Kieran Atreides, rather, the Swords Master, and Inez, the princess, I think now they're on Arrakis with Valia Harkonnen, and I think that their storyline becomes a lot more interesting, especially because I thought those two characters together were probably, the princess and the Swords Master, I think had one of the more interesting subplots in the show that just really didn't go anywhere. And I really like those two characters from the beginning, but they just never found the time for them. So I'd be interested to see where they go into Season 2. But I said at the beginning, right? I'm one of these people who didn't love Season 1. I did spoiler discussions for every single episode. You can go check all of them out in previous episodes of the Access Blockbusters pod or in individualized segments that are on the channel. But I'm very excited for Season 2 because this show didn't suffer for me in a fundamental way that, that would derail other shows. That would make me go, oh no, I don't really want to watch Season 2. And I think that if you have a show, if you have a Season 1 that suffers from a couple things, for example, the characters themselves are inherently just poorly written or just bad characters, right? It's really hard to recover from that. I talked about, earlier in the previous episode of the Access Blockbusters pod about why Skeleton Crew got it right. And a primary reason was the characters, right? And if you have good characters in television shows, that's a really good foundation to build off of. On top of that, the storylines themselves, honestly, in Dune Prophecy were quite interesting and quite, intriguing to think about where they could go in the future, especially. And the story itself was not bad. It was pretty decent. Really, the big thing holding Dune Prophecy back is something that is incredibly fixable, honestly. And that's why I'm excited about season 2, because the potential of this universe and the potential of this show is expansive. It's huge, right? You could have an amazing season 2. And really, the big problem that I had of season 1 was pacing. And pacing, look, I think pacing is one of the, it can be a big problem, and I think it was a big problem in season 1, but it can be easily addressed if the writers and the showrunners know exactly what the problem was and how to fix it. Now, it's also incumbent upon Max, right, to maybe give them a couple more episodes to play with, because I do think that a 6-episode season is just too short for a show like this. I think 8 episodes minimum is what this show needed. So I think also if Max announces 6 episodes again, I'm going to be a bit disappointed, because sure, can they do it? For sure. And did they do it well in season 1? Not really. But I would think that, it's also on Max to say, hey, we get it. Maybe even one more episode in episode 7, but I'm hoping for 8 episodes at the bare minimum. So we'll see about that. But I think pacing, right? It's one of the easier things to fix if you're a writer. You can go, okay, so let's just focus up and let's go from here. I think actually to a much lesser extent, let's face it, I was not excited for Rings of Power Season 2. And I acknowledge a lot of you guys don't like Rings of Power Season 2. I'm not one of them. I really liked Rings of Power Season 2. I thought it was a huge step up from Season 1. I was not excited at all for Season 2 because I just didn't like Season 1. It was boring to me. And sure, pacing was a part of it, but there were, it had to climb those hurdles I was talking about. Just characters that were uninteresting, storylines that were uninteresting, and Rings of Power did a Herculean thing, I think, and it overcame a lot of those things. I think, the characters I wasn't as invested in Season 2. There were, other elements like Sauron, for example, playing Anatar, right? I think that really elevated the characters in the show, and Celebrimbor, for example. So I think that Dune Prophecy honestly has less of a lift than going from Rings of Power Season 1 to Rings of Power Season 2. I think if they can fix the pacing and they can just tighten it up, I think we have the chance for a great Season 2. So I'm excited to hear about this confirmation of a Season 2. But are you guys excited for Season 2? Again, I know Rings of Power Season 1, not the most popular show, not the most beloved, but I am glad that they are giving it another shot to have a Season 2. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, so for those of you who are not sports fans, have no fear, because while we are going to be talking about one of the biggest sporting events of the entire year, I would say, obviously in the United States, but also probably across the globe, this has very little to do with football. This has everything to do with movies and trailers, because for those of you who know, the Super Bowl is the time when the biggest studios come out and they drop some of their big trailers that, they know they're going to get one of the biggest audiences of the entire year at any event. It's the Super Bowl. So Super Bowl trailers, by the way, have been, coming out for a long time, but the price has just gone up and up and up and up. It is now close to $10 million for 30 seconds, I believe. And if you want a whole minute, oh my goodness, like $20 million or something like that. It's crazy. It's crazy how much it costs to put your trailer out in the Super Bowl. So today, I thought, we're still a couple weeks out from the Super Bowl, and I thought today we would take some time to just predict, actually we're only 1 week away from the Super Bowl by the time this podcast is coming out. So that's crazy. But I thought we'd take some time today to just predict, because as of the recording of this segment, it might be announced, like sometimes movie studios make announcements. They're like, trailer coming at the Super Bowl, and then they announce it ahead of time. But as of the recording of this podcast, of this segment, I don't know any of the trailers that are going to come out on the Super Bowl. So I thought it'd be fun to take a look here and see what are the likeliest films and TV shows. I've included some TV shows here that, I think are less likely inherently, just because the return on investment, right? If you're going to pay $10 million for a Super Bowl spot, a 30-second spot, for movies, right? You get your return on investment from new viewers, from ticket sales, right? But for streaming, the only way you make new revenue is by new subscribers. And so, yeah, sure. You might get a lot of people who hadn't watched or weren't planning on watching the show before, but let's just say a show like that just came out, Agatha All Along, for example, maybe if they put a trailer out in the Super Bowl, you get people who had Disney Plus being like, oh, sure, I'll check it out. That doesn't make them any more money. So the return on investment is not as clear, right? So that's why I think inherently TV shows are much less likely to have Super Bowl spots, but, it's not impossible because, yeah, you can get a lot of new subscribers or people resubscribing, I should say, for certain TV shows. I remember right as the pandemic was happening, or actually this was right before the pandemic, 2020, I believe, or maybe 2021. I think 2021, actually. Yeah, 2021, they released a whole Disney Plus spot for Marvel where it was a little glimpse of WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki. Actually, it might have been 2020. I think, 2021 was when they released the full Falcon and the Winter Soldier trailer. So, so it happens, right? It does happen for sure. So let's go through this list. I'm going to give you my top 5 picks and then a couple dark horses. And then, I'll just mention a few or a lot of projects that I think just aren't going to have Super Bowl trailer spots, but it's still within the realm of possibility, right? Vague possibility. Now, I am also, I want to be upfront here and just say the selection process is not just what I think the biggest movies of the year are. It's not even just release dates, right? Because sure, some films are, like Avatar is not going to have a Super Bowl spot, and if it does, I'm going to be shocked because it's coming out in December, right? Wicked Part 2, for as much as I'd like to see a trailer, because I loved Wicked Part 1, is not going to have a Super Bowl trailer spot because it's coming out in 9 months, right? It's just not going to happen. So release date is definitely a part of it. But the other part of it is money, right? I think a film like Five Nights at Freddy's is just not going to have a Super Bowl spot, even if it was coming out at the prime, release date in terms of distance from the Super Bowl, because it's just not a big budget film. And to spend $10 million on one project, in marketing is crazy when you could spend that all on just bombarding news broadcasts and cable TV and stuff like that, So it just doesn't seem likely. So these are all big budget films for a reason, because it costs a lot of money to put these spots on the Super Bowl. That being said, let me just run through quickly a bunch of films in a show that I think are very likely not to have Super Bowl spots. And then we're going to run through a couple honorable mentions, and then we'll run through my top 5 picks. So, and if I forgot one, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear. Elio, I just don't think they're going to put that much of a marketing push into the Pixar film. We'll see. Paddington and Peru and Captain America Brave New World are coming out on February 14th, literally less than a week after the Super Bowl. I just don't think it makes sense. It doesn't make financial sense. Minecraft in another world where it looked really good. The first 2 trailers looked really good. I could have seen it, but I think that the backlash is just going to be even worse. It might even deter people from going out to see it. So yeah, I wouldn't put Minecraft there. Daredevil, I think similarly to Captain America, is just coming out so soon. It also just dropped its trailer, so I don't think it's very likely. Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon are on the bubble for me. I think maybe, and I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, but they also feel like films where $10 million is a lot of money to put into one marketing push, when also How to Train Your Dragon and Lilo and Stitch are pretty known properties. So it feels like once they actually start their marketing push, it feels more likely that they're going to actually, use that money more in that realm. But we'll see. I wouldn't be shocked. I just would be surprised is all. Now, my 2 honorable mentions are 2 TV shows, because like I said, TV shows you're just not likely to see a return on investment, because new subscribers are the only way you make money. But The Last of Us Season 2 and or Season 2, both coming out in April, I actually think have a decent shot of getting Super Bowl trailers. Andor hasn't had a trailer, a full Season 2 trailer yet. And The Last of Us has only had teasers, basically. But if you want your national audience, and these are 2 shows that were beloved, right, in both the Star Wars corner and the Max corner, the Disney Plus and Max corners. And I think that if you want the audiences to know that these films are coming out, definitely, this is definitely the place to do it. So I wouldn't be shocked. Honestly, these are my honorable mentions because they're TV shows. Like if there were movies, I would definitely put them on here. Okay, 5 movies now I think that are definitely going to get Super Bowl trailers, going from least likely to most likely, in my opinion. Number 5 is a film actually that I don't think people have really heard of, and I think that's why it's the perfect film to be on this list, is F1, the Joseph Kosinski film. And now if you don't know Joseph Kosinski's name, you should, because he's the one who directed Top Gun Maverick that made over $1 billion. Now, again, budget might be a thing here because, sure, I don't know normally if a film would be willing to, or if a studio would be willing to give a Super Bowl spot to a film like F1, but I think that riding off of the, the high that was Top Gun Maverick, if you have a trailer that looks as interesting in terms of, going from the airplane maneuvers to now Formula One racing. Also, Formula One is so popular, right? And I think that, Joseph Kosinski's name, all you have to do is put from the director of Top Gun Maverick, and you're going to get immediate buzz from that if the trailer looks good. I think F1, which comes out in June 2025, is sneakily one of the most likely properties to get a Super Bowl trailer. We'll see. We'll see about that. Coming in at number 4 for me is Thunderbolts. Now, Thunderbolts, I am a little more hesitant on because it does usually mean, or, you know, the release date that Thunderbolts occupies is usually the release date that Marvel will drop a Super Bowl trailer for, the May release date, right? You have Avengers films and Captain America films. I remember Captain America Civil War had a Super Bowl spot. Avengers films have Super Bowl spots. Both Endgame and Infinity War, I believe, had Super Bowl spots. It's the May release date, right? Guardians has had Super Bowl spots because of the May release dates. It feels like we've gotten a lot already from Thunderbolts. That makes me a little more hesitant, honestly. It just makes me a little more hesitant that, you know, to think that Thunderbolts is going to get another trailer, because they've released a couple, like 2 or 3 minute trailers. So I don't know. We'll see. I just, you know, I put it here not because I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's more likely than not, but I just be curious, because also, hint, hint, wink, wink, there is a third Marvel project that we haven't talked about yet that I think is more likely to get that $10 million spot. Although Marvel has enough money to do both, so we'll see. We'll see about that. Number 3 is Superman. And I know that James Gunn has talked about that there is going to be something coming at the Puppy Bowl, which is, I think, after the Super Bowl or something like that. But I still think that there is a decent enough chance that they will just, you know, do something at the Super Bowl anyways, because. And I know there was this whole controversy around David Corenswet's face when he was flying. I don't really care. I don't care. That whole debate is just so uninteresting to me, because let's just wait for the movie. It's a frame. It's a fraction of a frame of a trailer. It doesn't matter. But I think that this movie, in particular, Superman, needs as many eyeballs on it as possible. And if they think they got a good film, they need as many people to be seeing this and to realize there is a Superman movie coming. It is a different Superman than the Man of Steel one, which they probably didn't like just based on, again, general audience reactions. I'm not trying to generalize. I'm just saying that more people, like, it's split. It's split enough that there is a chance that they didn't like the Man of Steel version, the Henry Cavill version, and they need to see that there is a new Superman coming, and it's coming soon, and it looks good, which I hope they think it looks good. I think it looks good. I have my concerns with it, but I think it looks good overall. So I think that is something that they need to do, that Superman just needs to get as many eyeballs on it as possible. The second most likely Super Bowl trailer, in my opinion, though, is Fantastic Four, because I think that if speaking of getting eyeballs on this property, people need to know that Fantastic Four is coming. And what better time to put a teaser out, right? A teaser trailer out than about 5 months before the movie comes out. I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect timing to launch their marketing campaign. And this is the movie where we go, we're coming. Like, this is the big MCU movie of the year. We are coming. Pedro Pascal, people know him, people love him. Vanessa Kirby, people like her, people love her. The other character is Joseph Quinn. You know, people really liked him in Stranger Things. So just introduce the Fantastic Four to the audience, to the globe, really, who are watching the Super Bowl, and we'll be on our way. But number 1, I think this is pretty obvious, actually, to me, is Jurassic World Rebirth. Because it's Jurassic World, I think people also need to know, because, you know, do you sense a common theme here, that these are properties that people may not have realized, and I'm talking about the general public, not this, the audience of my YouTube channel, which obviously we're plugged into all these different things going on. But the general movie-going audience, or just the general audience, just people, they're not plugged in. And so I think that they need to see Jurassic World is back, and it's different because it's not the Chris Pratt version, which maybe they liked, maybe they didn't like. Scarlett Johansson, Mahershala Ali, Jonathan Bailey, looks good, looks really good. So I think Jurassic World, and also, by the way, speaking of having money, these films are pretty much guaranteed to make $1 billion. Now, I say guaranteed facetiously because, sure, I mean, Jurassic World Rebirth could come out and can make $200 million. But let's be real. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, not really good, in my opinion, and critics didn't seem to like it, and it made over $1 billion easily. Jurassic World Dominion, I would argue, even worse. Critics would say, even worse, made $1 billion. So as long as the film is good, it's going to make $1 billion, in my opinion, and people just need to know it's coming. And the Super Bowl is a great place to announce that to the world. So those are my most likely Super Bowl trailers that I think we're going to get. F1, and number 4, we have Thunderbolts, Superman at 3, Fantastic Four First Steps at 2, and then, of course, Jurassic World Rebirth at number 1. But what do you guys think? What are the most likely Super Bowl trailers that we could be getting? Of course, by the time the segment and this podcast come out, we might have gotten confirmation already. So, again, just, making a note here that this is recorded a few days in advance of the podcast coming out. But, it's still fun to think about. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, so Netflix has released its promo for what's coming in 2025. I took a look at it. I thought it was going to be, a mashup of footage from these things. I was very excited to see maybe some Squid Game going on, some Stranger Things, but no, it's just a montage of, side characters from all these different things. Demogorgons and the front man with the mask on. It's obviously not the actor who plays the front man in Squid Game, and, all these different other things from different shows and settings and locations. But it was cute. But then, they do the whole list at the very end, and they're like, coming in 2025, Stranger Things, Squid Game, and then, Wake Up Dead Man, which I totally forgot about, which, by the way, that's really exciting. The Rian Johnson Knives Out 3. Knives Out, one of my favorite movies of all time. Love it. Really liked Glass Onion as well. So excited for Wake Up Dead Man. Totally forgot that was coming out. You got Cobra Kai coming out, Emily in Paris, You. So tons and tons and tons of good stuff coming out from Netflix in 2025. But the one, unsurprisingly, for those of you who have seen my channel for a while, the one that I am most excited about by far, this is probably the most excited I've been for a television show, maybe ever, because this show is probably... it's in my top 5 still. It used to be my favorite show of all time, and then slowly I've started to catch up on other big shows that have come out over the last few decades, and it's dropped. It's in the top 5 still for sure. But it was one of the first shows I watched during the pandemic, as soon as the pandemic began in full force, and when we were all just watching TV. And Stranger Things really captured my heart from the beginning. I finished seasons 1 through 3 when that came out, and had just been waiting for season 4 for a long time. Obviously, COVID shut a lot of things down, and so season 4 didn't come out until 2022. That was awesome. I loved season 4, and now we've just been waiting for the 5th and final season. So they teased Stranger Things season 5 in that now coming to Netflix in 2025 little video, but not really. And we haven't really gotten a release date as of yet, so we're still kind of waiting. But apparently, Netflix has sent the Duffer Brothers, the creators of Stranger Things, to I believe it's called Next on Netflix, and it's an event in Los Angeles. So it looks like this is where they released that little clip and whatnot. But they showed off the first footage from Stranger Things, and I'm not really going to go through the footage descriptions because honestly, it doesn't seem like it's that interesting. It's just all the actors that we love and know, Millie Bobby Brown and Gaten Matarazzo, and we see I think. David Harbour there, so just all the the characters and actors we love, but it seems like they were all just on blue screens. It was a sort of a behind the scenes kind of footage reveal, which I thought we saw. I could be wrong, but I thought we saw some little clips of behind the scenes footage, little things that they were doing ahead of season 5. And I'm 100% sure there was a little bit of a 30-second clip of them filming season 5. But again, we didn't really get a whole lot. It doesn't look like a whole lot is revealed in this early footage. But then Netflix also released something else interesting, which was an Instagram post or a social media post, which I saw on Instagram, of Millie Bobby Brown as 11 in a wanted poster, not a criminal wanted poster, but a missing persons wanted poster. And it seems like we're doing a little bit of a parallel here of the first season, because it looks like Jane Hopper, or 11, as we know her, has gone missing. And from what we know, the show takes place, I believe, in 1987, and it looks like she has disappeared in 1986 in the summer. So it's interesting because maybe this fifth season rather is going to start out here with 11 having been missing for quite a while actually, and it's sort of a reverse. It's like we're not using having 11 help the kids look for Will Byers, but it's now we're looking for 11. And obviously with Vecna in play as the main antagonist of this series now, the one who is quote-unquote pulling all the strings, it appears, it was Vecna all along, it turns out, not Agatha all along. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's a very interesting thing that, now maybe 11 has been missing, and who knows how much we'll be able to see her in the early in the early goings of this show. But anyways, the quote that I really wanted to gravitate towards in this segment here was, again, footage description, cool. A little teaser image, very cool, gets me really excited. But this is what the Duffer Brothers had to say on stage. And this is what gets me so excited. He says, this is Ross Duffer, one of the Duffer Brothers, the creators of the show. He says, quote, "We spent a full year filming this season. By the end, we'd captured over 650 hours of footage. So needless to say, this is our biggest and most ambitious season yet. It's like 8 blockbuster movies. It's pretty insane." Matt Duffer then says, quote, "We've been making this show together for almost a year." It says 1 year, I think maybe a year plus is basically what he meant. Anyways, continuing on. "There was a lot of crying. There was so much crying. The show means so much to all of us, and everyone put their hearts and souls into it. And we hope and believe that passion will translate to this season." I am so excited by that because, guys, what is the biggest complaint? What is the biggest complaint about these Disney Plus Star Wars shows? Even Skeleton Crew. I love Skeleton Crew. What's the biggest complaint? It's short. It's so short, right? Like 30-minute episodes for Star Wars shows. And even look, I mean, again, you don't want to drag things out for the sake of dragging things out. Last of Us had hour-long episodes, I think. Penguin had hour-long episodes. They felt great. Love them. But Stranger Things, which the episodes have been gradually getting longer and longer and longer and longer, which is crazy, right? I think at the beginning, they were something like 45-minute episodes. And by the time you get to season 4, the first few episodes were maybe like 50 minutes or so. And then there was, I think, an hour-long episode, like episode 4 was an hour-long episode. And then episode 7 was like an hour and 25 minutes, which was awesome. It was like a whole movie, basically. You're watching a whole movie, which was so good. And I think episode 8 was something like an hour, and episode 9 was like 2 hours long. Episode 9, or was it episode 8? Anyways, totally forget. But the last episode of season 4 was so good. It was like a movie, and it totally worked. It felt warranted, right? Nothing feels rushed in this show, but nothing feels dragged out. It feels like we're warranted. However they're going to cut up the season, we're warranted this, if you're going to spend like, let's say an hour-ish per episode, with a couple hours added on. So 9 episodes in season 4, I think. So that's like 11 hours of footage. However you're going to cut that up, that's like 11 hours spent of just being with these characters. And now they're saying 8 blockbuster movies. Let's just say every episode kind of averages out to an hour and a half. We're going to spend the last, little bit with these characters in Hawkins, right? Which is, again, precious time. It's like 12 hours of the show. And I'm going to assume the last episode of the season, or of the series rather, is going to be like 3 hours long, which I'm here for it, I'm here for it. I am so excited to see how this show concludes. I know that, a lot of people have kind of jumped off the bandwagon because it was very popular to like the first season, and then it was very popular to not like the third and fourth seasons. Totally fine, by the way, if you just genuinely don't like it. But I don't, for the life of me, I think that this show is amazing. I love this show. And so I am so excited for whatever season 5 has to offer. I am still patiently waiting for a trailer or a release date. Just give me something. We got a release date for Squid Game season 3. One has to assume that Stranger Things season 5 will be a little bit after. I would guess probably Thanksgiving or fall of 2025. We'll have to see about that. Guys, what do you think about this news or just the revelations that Stranger Things season 5 is going to be like 8 blockbuster movies, 8 episodes, 8 blockbuster movies? It's just insane. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Squid Game season 2 has just wrapped up, but surprise, surprise, for me at least, when I finish Squid Game season 2, season 3 is coming out very, very soon. This segment in the podcast will contain a very minor spoiler, not even necessarily about the structure, or the story rather, of Squid Game season 2, but just the structure of it. And so if you don't want to know structurally how they're approaching seasons 2 and 3, then feel free to click off. But I'm not going to be revealing anything about the story if that is what you're worried about. So feel free to stick around if you haven't seen it and you're not, you just don't want to know anything about the story. So Squid Game season 2, the big revelation, and the thing that I didn't know, I talked about this in my personal review of Squid Game 2, which I quite enjoyed, save for this one thing, and the fact that this season of Squid Game season 2 is not a full season. It's half a season. And I had my thoughts on that. You can go check out my full spoiler and non-spoiler review of Squid Game season 2. But basically, the whole thing was that it looks like seasons 2 and 3 are going to be one giant continuous season that they wanted to split up at a certain point. And I know that different movies and different shows have done it better than others. I think Dune Part 1 is honestly half of a movie. I think Dune Part 2 is a continuation of that half movie. I think Across the Spider-Verse is very similar, but I think a film like Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, as it used to be called, or Wicked Part 1, as it used to be called, because I think it's just Wicked now. I could be wrong. Anyways, Wicked Part 1, these are examples to me of Part 1s that do it amazingly, do it really well, because they feel like complete stories. And that's just my opinion. If you feel differently, totally fine. Even if you love Across the Spider-Verse, which I know a lot of you do, I think that, one of the common things that I've heard, at least from people who love it, who don't like it, and for me who likes it a lot, is just that it's frustrating because it just doesn't feel like a complete movie. And of course, you can make the arguments about Lord of the Rings and Empire Strikes Back and whatnot. So again, I understand. But anyway, Squid Game season 2, just, I really liked it. I thought it was quite good. It didn't quite capture the highs of season 1, which is fine because season 1 I think is remarkable. But we head into season 3 and we're like, okay, so a lot of what we think of season 2 is really going to hinge on season 3 because season 3 is really just season 2 part 2. I talked in my review about Loki, right? The way that Loki was structured is bizarre to me. Why didn't they make this one giant 12 episode season? Because literally season 2 of Loki, episode 1, takes place, I've said this many times, literal seconds after the end of Loki season 1. So it feels so confusing. Anyways, so we're getting a season 3. The question had been, when? They said, and they had been teasing, we're going to get it in 2025, which Squid Game Season 2 released about 4 or 5 days before the end of 2024. So literally at the very end of 2024, basically early 2025. And we had been getting reports from the creator of the show that we were going to be getting Squid Game Season 2 in 2025. And now, with all of the Netflix promotional stuff going on this past week, we have an official release date here. And Squid Game Season 3 with a really crazy looking poster with one of the circle mask people, circle mask soldiers, I guess, carrying, looks like a dead body, a dead player, into one of those coffins, those brightly colored coffins, and it says Squid Game 3 on it. This is the first promotional poster, first promotional image, and it says prepare for the final game. Singular, interestingly enough, singular game, only on Netflix, June 27th. So, looks like we are going to be getting Squid Game 3 in just about 6 months. The question for me is, why they decided to market it like this? Why is it Squid Game Season 2 and Squid Game Season 3 instead of Squid Game Season 2 Part 1 and Squid Game Season 3? Squid Game Season 2 Part 2? I think that you could have gotten a lot of mileage out of that anyways. I think they've done that with shows like Cobra Kai and whatnot. Honestly, I wonder if you could have gotten even more mileage out of that if you had done that. Because I think, sure, like Squid Game Season 3, but, people are going to be like, wait, why? If you hadn't seen Season 2 at least, if you were going to be like, well, then why would I watch Season 2, right? It's like, it doesn't feel like it matters until you know the structure, until you know what's going on, and the fact that they're just basically splitting up one big season of television. And I get it, Netflix, you don't want to put, all 14 episodes or however long it's going to be in one go. Hint, why don't you try just dropping an episode at a time? That seems to work for a lot of other studios. Anyways, they were obviously very famous for the binge model, but honestly, I think that it's about time they really start to drop episodes in batches. Like, I'm not saying 1 a week. You don't have to do that, but like 2 a week, I feel like would be fine. I really do wonder what they're going to do with Stranger Things 5, which we'll talk about either early or later on in this podcast. But anyways, I think that it's an interesting thing that, we are going to get I think it's going to be something like 14 episodes of Squid Game in the span of 6 months. And it's going to be 2 different seasons, apparently. It's all sort of a naming convention, I suppose, because it doesn't make a huge difference in terms of the quality of these projects. That being said, I still think it's a little strange what's going on here. And yeah, I don't know. It's hard to kind of, make out what the rationale is, other than just Netflix saying, hey, we want to get more viewers and whatnot. So Squid Game Season 3 is coming out. And they released a synopsis. I'm not going to read the synopsis here because it contains pretty major spoilers for the very end of Season 2. But from the synopsis, it's basically what we thought it was going to be, For those of you who have seen Season 2, no spoilers again, but just basically what happens at the very end of Season 2, literally the last shot of Season 2, looks like it's just going to continue on. And we have some characters with some very unresolved arcs because of just the fact that it's halfway through a season of television, in my mind. So some very unresolved arcs going on here. But I think that looks like we're going to be heading towards resolution. So guys, Squid Game Season 3, rather, coming out in just about 6 months. In fact, just under 6 months. What do you guys think of that? And are you excited for a Squid Game Season 3? I am. I'm certainly excited for a Squid Game Season 3, even though, again, I had my own frustrations with Season 2. But let me know, what did you think about Season 2? I haven't heard from a lot of you guys about Season 2, so I would be very curious to see if you enjoyed Season 2 and the way that they structured it, or, maybe you didn't. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, this is certainly a week for Marvel actors denying things and then backtracking on things and all sorts of craziness. We'll talk about Benedict Cumberbatch and Doctor Strange in Doomsday in just a second, but first we gotta get to this story about Chris Evans and Avengers Doomsday. So, a few weeks ago, we reported on a story. We didn't report on it. We just talked about it. That's what we do on this podcast. We talk about things that are going on and, whatever is happening, movies, television, all that kind of stuff. And there was a report, I want to say it was Hollywood Reporter, one of the more reputable sources in the industry, who said Chris Evans is confirmed to be coming back in Avengers Doomsday, and that's it. They didn't say as Captain America, they didn't say as Nomad, so we even talked about, in last week's episode, a couple theories, right? What could be, what kind of character could he be playing? Was it going to be a Nomad version? Was it going to be Captain Hydra? Was it going to be actually Captain America? It didn't say. Right? And also, along with that report came the additional report that not only was Chris Evans coming back, but Haley Atwell as well as was coming back as well as Peggy Carter. So now, there's been an article published in Variety, speaking of backtracking, as we'll talk about later with Benedict Cumberbatch, that Chris Evans is now flatly denying that he is going to be at Avengers Doomsday. This is actually an article that, an interview done from Variety with Anthony Mackie, promoting Captain America Brave New World, obviously the Captain America film starring Anthony Mackie, and not Chris Evans, who I doubt will be appearing in this film at all. And Anthony Mackie gave some quotes here about, his thoughts on Chris Evans potentially coming back in in Avengers Doomsday. But then, Chris Evans, I guess they also contacted Chris Evans and they were like, hey, are you coming back for Avengers Doomsday? And he gives an answer. So let's talk about what Anthony Mackie had to say first, because this is interesting. Anthony Mackie could be, making things up as well, but this is what he said. And actually, this article didn't come from Variety. This interview, rather. The article was from Variety, but the interview was not. And this is actually an interview from Esquire magazine as part of a new cover story. But this is what Anthony Mackie said when he was, asked what he thought about Chris Evans coming back as Captain America and Avengers Doomsday. He said, quote, "I didn't know. I talked to Chris a few weeks ago, and it wasn't on the table then. At least he didn't tell me it was on the table because I asked him. I was like, they said they're bringing everyone back for the movie. Are you coming back?" He goes, "Oh, I'm happily retired. I learned that right then," he continued, and by that right then, he means when the news broke online about Chris Evans coming back. Anyways, the quote continues, quote, "My manager showed me. He's like, oh, so I guess Chris is coming back. That's all I know. I haven't seen a script." Okay. Let's table that for just a second, because I think it's important to pair Chris Evans' comments with Anthony Mackie's comments to kind of get a bigger picture of maybe what's going on here. So then, give some context. The article gives some context about what's going on of, how Chris Evans came back as Human Torch and Deadpool and Wolverine. And then they reached out to Chris Evans, and this is the quote that Chris Evans gave. Quote, "That's not true, though. This always happens. I mean, it happens every couple years, ever since Endgame. I've just stopped responding to it. Yeah, no, I'm happily retired." Then the article kind of goes on, some more quotes from Anthony Mackie just talking about the fact that, he's really excited about Doomsday and Secret Wars. He doesn't want it to be kind of a carbon copy of Infinity War and Endgame, though, which I'm sure that's what the Russos also want. We'll see. We'll see where we go from there. And then also the fact that, he wants to be playing Captain America for maybe 10 more years, and that's about it. But let's get back to the Chris Evans stuff here, the Chris Evans-ness of it all. So the thing is, right, I feel like, so here's what we've learned over the past few years. Actors can lie. Actors will lie. Marvel actors will definitely lie. Case in point, one Mr. Andrew Garfield. So when actors say, "I'm not going to be in this," whatever, I just don't take their word for it. If they say, "I'm going to be in it," well, that's obviously, that's an indication, right? I think Jamie Foxx was the first one. He was one of the big first leaks post Endgame. He was like, yeah, I'm going to be in the new Spider-Man. I'm not going to be blue. And everyone was like, what? Really? And so if they say they're going to be in it, then yeah, take them at their word, generally speaking. But if they're not, if they say they're not going to be in these projects, I don't trust anything, to be quite honest with you. I don't take any of that to the bank. So if Chris Evans said, "No, absolutely not. I'm going to be in I'm not going to be in Avengers Doomsday," at any point, even before the rumors came out, even before the reports came out that he was going to be in Doomsday, I wouldn't have, it's not that I wouldn't have believed him. I just would not have taken that, to the bank at all. If I don't know, Scarlett Johansson comes out tomorrow and she's like, "Nope, I'm not going to be in Doomsday," I'm going to be like, okay, we'll see when it comes out, right? So again, it's just a matter of, we don't have to take these people at their words anymore, because let's just wait and see what happens, right? Who knows? Andrew Garfield was not in Spider-Man No Way Home until he very much was in Spider-Man No Way Home. And it's interesting too, because the justifications that Anthony Mackie gives about, not knowing about all of this, it's very possible that he hasn't seen a script yet. I mean, they might still be writing the script for Avengers Doomsday. I suspect he's seen the story, though. He knows what the story is going to be. So I feel like it's sort of a half-truth. He's like, yeah, I haven't seen a script yet. I feel like he knows what the story is going to be. And I think he would have known if Chris Evans was coming back. So I feel like there's kind of a half-truth going on here. But bottom line is this. Chris Evans denies he's going to be in Avengers Doomsday. Do we believe him? Honestly, I don't know. I don't think it matters. The report says he's going to be in Doomsday, and I take that at face value more than I take Chris Evans' words, not because I don't trust Chris Evans, generally speaking, but because actors can lie about these things. Andrew Garfield lied for months about not being in Spider-Man No Way Home. So I think at the end of the day, sure, this is interesting insofar as, yeah, Chris Evans is denying it, but I think let's just wait and see if he's going to be back in Doomsday. The other thing, too, that I want to bring up is the fact that if he hadn't been in Deadpool and Wolverine just a few months ago, I mean, sure, maybe you might have believed him a little more, right? But at this point, he's game to come back for even a little bit in Deadpool and Wolverine. Who's to say he's not game to coming back in Avengers Doomsday? So I think that this is, this all could be a non-story, because maybe in the first trailer for Doomsday in a year or whenever that's going to come out, the first shot is going to be this Captain Hydra played by Chris Evans. Who knows? So I think we'll just have to wait and see. But, these Marvel actors, they're put through the gamut. And so with all these press interviews and whatnot, so it'll be interesting to see what actually happens. Guys, do you think after these interviews that Chris Evans will be in Avengers Doomsday? Or do you think he's telling the truth and he's not going to be in Avengers Doomsday? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, so it looks like Benedict Cumberbatch just did a big whoopsies. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Thus is the life of a weekly podcast where one week you might have breaking news that has all sorts of ramifications for all sorts of different things in, the MCU in this case. And then the next week, the actor comes right back and he's like, just kidding. Just kidding. So to recap, before we get to this quote, it's a very, very short quote here. And I guess there's some more to speculate about it, but, before we get there, just to recap, last week we talked about the fact that Benedict Cumberbatch came out and he was like, hey, I know that they retooled Avengers 5, which is going to be Avengers Kang Dynasty, and it's now Avengers Secret Wars, and this was in a big piece, mind you. So this was in a big, long interview piece where probably this was done a while ago, and he was just kind of talking off the cuff, and he even says at one point, am I spoiling anything? Then F it, he says F, not, but he says the actual word, but anyways, to keep this a family-friendly channel. And he's like, yeah, I whatever, I'm just going to say what I want to say. And I'm not in Avengers 5 because the role that I had was cut. And so then we were like, okay, so then let's talk about, let's speculate, let's think about what that means. And I mean, what I was saying was, so that probably means that, he's on some kind of adventure, and then maybe Doctor Strange Day will happen before Avengers Secret Wars, but it makes sense, right? And, the story needs to serve the story. Like, if Benedict Cumberbatch's Doctor Strange doesn't fit in Avengers Doomsday, no problem, the story needs to fit the story. But then, come this week, we have another quote here from Benedict Cumberbatch. It is a very short one, and this is what he has to say. Quote, I got that wrong. I am in the next one. Don't ever believe anything I say. Okay, so there you go. Benedict Cumberbatch and Doctor Strange is in Avengers Doomsday. Now, what I'm going to take from this whole entire saga, because I still think there are a couple interesting things to take away from all of this, is number one, I think that while he probably is now in Doomsday, right? And, he says, don't believe anything I say. I don't know what to believe anymore. Is he in Doomsday? Is he not in Doomsday? I'm going to assume he is now, right? And I'm going to assume what happened was basically the interview came out, and this is why, again, I don't think, the actors all make fun of the fact that, Marvel has these, people who are always watching, and if you slip up in an interview, they're going to tranquilize you, and then they're going to, reprimand you, and you're going to get fired from that. It's all just sort of silly and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, they don't want the actors spoiling things like Mark Ruffalo, basically spoiling the entire end of Infinity War. Did he get in trouble for that? Probably not. Probably not, right? They just don't want it to happen, and they're going to be strict about it if they can. But they're not going to actually, punish you. But it's important, right, to have publicists and to have, agents and to have people to go to. And for Benedict Cumberbatch to go to people like Kevin Feige and be like, hey, is this okay for me to say? And, just based on the nonchalant manner in which that previous interview, the one we talked about last week, was kind of said, where he was like, yeah, I don't care. I'm just going to say things. Is that a spoiler? Whatever. I have a feeling that he didn't clear a lot of what he was going to say with his publicist or his agent, right? Because I think if he did, I would assume that those people were like, let's just check with Kevin Feige. Let's just check with the Marvel creative team and see, is this true? Can we say this? Because, Benedict Cumberbatch is trustworthy. I don't think he was actually going to ever outright in an interview be like, yeah, so, the original plan for Kang Dynasty was this, and then my role in Secret Wars is this. He was never going to do that. He's just not that kind of person. But, to just casually be like, yeah, I'm not in Avengers 5 anymore. I'm pretty sure if he said that in that interview, it wasn't cleared because it wasn't approved by Kevin Feige to say, because if he is, in fact, in Avengers 5, well, that would never have gotten published. So I think that's what happened. That interview came out. He didn't clear it with Kevin Feige or Kevin Feige's team. And then Kevin Feige's team probably called Benedict Cumberbatch as soon as the interview came out with all the headlines and was like, hey, you need to correct this because you are in the next one. So that's what I think happened. But the implication from that is that I think Benedict Cumberbatch's Doctor Strange will have a very small role in Avengers Doomsday. Because if Benedict Cumberbatch, and look, Doctor Strange is a very prevalent, MCU character. He's one of the bigger heroes. And I still believe, by the way, when he says that he has a big role to play in Secret Wars, I still believe that. I think that, if he was the star, like the lead Avenger, because I very well believe he could be the lead Avenger in Secret Wars, right? He is that big of a character in the MCU now, without Iron Man, without Captain America. I think, though, if he was the lead character, lead Avenger, one of the lead characters in Doomsday, he would have definitely known that by now. I mean, they're ramping up to film in probably just a few months, right? And if he just has to film for 1 week, that's fine. He can do it. Totally can do it. But if he is, there for like 8 weeks, 10 weeks, he would definitely know that. So what I take from this is that Kevin Feige probably called him and he was like, hey, no, the Russos did write you into the script, or McFeely wrote you into the script, right? And I think he was like, oh, okay, got to clarify that. So I think that's what that means. I think he does have a role to play in Doomsday. I think it will probably be very short, maybe maybe he's imprisoned in the movie, and part of the plot is to free him. And so he only has to film for like a week, and then he gets freed at the end, and then at the end, Dr. Doom rules and whatever, and then all that kind of stuff happens. Who knows, right? That could be a possibility, but I think that is all that means. So Benedict Cumberbatch corrects his statement from before. He is, in some capacity, going to be in Doomsday. What do you make of this, guys? What do you think? And also, what do you think this means for Doctor Strange 3? Do you still think it's going to come out? A lot of you guys were saying between Doomsday and Secret Wars, maybe. I mean, it would be a very tight window to fit that in, but, it's possible. Let me know in the comments what you think about this in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. So just before I was getting ready to upload and, finalize the podcast episode for this week, we have a little bit of breaking news here, which, is not uncommon on a Friday afternoon, but this could be big. This could be big, or it could be much ado about nothing in the end, but for right now, this could be big. The Superman movie, and Warner Brothers in particular, are being sued. And the film, from my understanding, may not be released, or if the lawsuit goes through and the plaintiff, if they win, then this movie may not be released in certain foreign territories. By foreign, we mean non-United States. Now, I want to preface this entire segment by saying I am not a legal expert. I have no qualifications in legal counseling and law or anything like that. So everything I'm about to say, and honestly, most of it, I'm not even here to talk about the specifics of the trial itself or the lawsuit. I'm going to really just read through this Deadline article that reported this, and we'll kind of talk through that. But I think, and I'll talk about my basic understanding of what the possible outcomes of this are. But really, I just want to talk about the fact that, just the fact that this is happening has some ramifications already for the Superman movie. We'll see how this develops in the coming weeks. And, I just based on what I've seen, I wouldn't be particularly surprised if in a few weeks this just kind of gets resolved somehow, either through some negotiations or whatnot. I don't know. Again, no legal background. I don't know how these things work in particular, but this also could develop into something bigger. And I think that this is kind of crazy. So yes, you heard that right. The Superman movie and Warner Brothers are being sued. And this is all very interesting, and we're going to go through this Deadline article. I'm going to go through not everything, but just in as much detail as I think makes sense to talk about here. So just to read, just starting from the beginning, because I don't usually read out these entire articles, but I want to read as much as is relevant to this segment. So let's go through this together, because again, this is all breaking news, and if you want to go through some legal analysis, I'm sure people will be posting their own videos in the coming days. But let's start out at the beginning. Quote, "The estate of Superman creator Joseph Schuster is suing Warner Brothers Discovery and its DC Comics, claiming it lacks the rights to release the upcoming summer tentpole in a handful of key territories. Plaintiff Mark Warren Peary, executor to the state, filed the suit today in federal court in the Southern District of New York, seeking, quote, damages and injunctive relief for the defendant's ongoing infringements in Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Australia, as well as declaratory relief establishing the Schuster estate's ownership rights across relevant jurisdictions." Okay, so then let's keep going here. Basically, they're talking about just the process that the lawsuit is going through. They're talking about what the Superman movie is about, and then we get to now the actual issues at stake, which is what I was really looking forward to. Looking for in this article, not looking forward to. So let's get to the actual issues. Quote, "At issue are foreign copyrights for the original Superman character and story contributed by Jerome Siegel and Schuster. Though Siegel and Schuster assigned worldwide Superman rights to DC's predecessor in 1938 for a mere $165 each, the copyright laws of countries with the British legal tradition, including Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Australia, contain provisions automatically terminating such assignments 25 years after an author's death, vesting in the Schuster estate the co-author's undivided copyright interest in such countries," the suit said. Quote, this is continuing on with the lawsuit. Quote, "Schuster died in 1992 and Siegel in 1996. By operation of law, Schuster's foreign copyrights automatically reverted to his estate in 2017 in most of these territories and in 2021 in Canada. Yet defendants continue," this is, again, a direct quote from the lawsuit. And I want to read this out just to make sure there's no ambiguity or anything like that. So anyways, continuing on with the lawsuit, quote, "Yet defendants continue to exploit Superman across these jurisdictions without the Schuster estate's authorization, including in motion pictures, television series, and merchandise, in direct contravention of these countries' copyright laws, which require the consent of all joint copyright owners to do so." Okay? And so then we move on through the article here. I think that is the brunt of what this article is talking about here. And it's just talking about, again, the rest of it is that the Superman movie is really big. I'm not going to read out the rest of it, I don't think, because, it's saying the lawsuit's requesting a jury trial. And I think that is about it in terms of the details that I wanted to talk about. It's a cease and desist order, which, again, I don't have legal background, but it's saying, quote, enjoining defendants, their offices, agents, employees, and those acting in concert with them preliminarily. Yeah, it just kind of goes on from there. A lot of legal jargon. Okay, so let's all take a step back here and just synthesize what's going on in my very specific non-legal brain, my movie fan, movie pundit, movie loving brain. Let's kind of figure out what's going on here. So basically, these creators of Superman, who it says in this article, did not have the rights to Superman, at least in the United States, because they sold it to DC, or what DC used to be in the 1930s or the 1940s. And so they gave up the rights. So now DC owns Superman, right? And, there's been all this sort of talk about in conjunction and in tangential relation to all this, that Superman as a character would be entering the public domain, I think, in the near future. But I think that's a little bit different because that is the version of Superman that DC originated. I'm pretty sure this is still under the purview of DC in the 1940s. And that is a very specific Superman, like the original vision for Superman, not all the New 52 stuff or even the 1960s, 70s. It's not all that kind of stuff. That's DC proper. But anyways, what I'm gathering from this lawsuit is that under this contract, any, territory, any foreign territory that was under the United Kingdom, or I guess, British, what did they say? British jurisdiction or something like that, has some provisions in these contracts, in the original, giving up of Superman to DC, that says upon 25 years, termination, or upon, 25 years post-death of these creators, the contract can undergo termination, and the rights will revert back to the Schuster estate. Because my first question with this, right, is why is this coming up all of a sudden? Why didn't this come up for Man of Steel? Why didn't this come up with Superman and Lois or whatever? And we have our answer. It's because, very specifically, this is the first big Superman project that's coming out post the reversion of the rights to the Schuster estate. Now, in terms of motivation, we don't know. I don't know. I don't think the Deadline article really talked about the motivation. Like, why? Because there's a surface level, what the lawsuit itself is objectively saying, there's a surface level there. The surface level is they were not happy or whatever, that they wanted to be consulted. The Schuster estate wanted to be consulted with, before signing off on the rights to this, these Superman movies to be released in Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Australia. That's the superficial legal reasoning. But, of course, with every lawsuit, there are underlying motivations, or at least, not underlying motivations, but secondary motivations. Is it a pride thing? Is it the fact that the estate just wanted to be consulted with this, and if they were, that they would be happy and they would have signed off on it? Is it a money thing? Is there an actual deeper issue going on here where there were some back channels that that DC went through? Again, all speculation. I don't know. I truly don't know. And honestly, to me, for the purposes of this segment, that's beyond the point, right? That's not really the point of this segment, because now what we have here, and I don't take any joy in saying this. This is not a good thing. We all want these movies to come out with zero negative fanfare, right? We don't want another Flash situation. None of us want another Flash situation. And if you do, I don't know what to say. Because that whole saga was crazy. We don't want another Jonathan Majors thing. We would just all prefer if these movies came out and we can judge them. And if we don't like them, that's the prerogative. You don't have to like it. But if a lot of us love it, that's all the better for it. So it's not a good thing. This isn't a good thing, because no matter what happens, right, this is going to be a little bit of a mark on the production and the release of Superman. What kind of mark and how big it is remains to be seen, right? Because this could just be a blip, and we hope it is, right? We hope in a week that we get this, we get the news that actually the two sides have settled to an agreement, and there's all, they're all fine with it and all that kind of stuff, and we can move on. And again, I mean, it would be pretty crippling. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, I don't know how big the Canadian, United Kingdom, Ireland, Australia, I don't know how big those markets are in terms of box office. So Superman could move forward, I suppose. Again, not knowing the full details of these contract agreements and whatnot. Superman, I suppose, could move forward, from my understanding, and just release and not release in those countries, I think. But, I mean, and maybe the box office wouldn't be hurt too badly, although it seems like, Canada and the United Kingdom and Australia and Ireland are pretty big markets for these movies, right? So I don't know. But maybe they think they can get away with it and just be like, well, let's figure this out later and we can just still release the movie. So I don't think the movie is going to be delayed, or I don't think the movie is not going to release in July. I still think that is perfectly fine. I just think now Warner Brothers is going to have to deal with this, right? And that's going to be another big thing going on here. And if it gets ugly, that could be another thing deterring people from going to the movies. Because, again, people are not going to take the time, and they should, right? We all should. That's why I'm making this segment. That's why we're talking about it here in detail, in explicit detail. It's because people should know exactly what's going on. Even if, like myself, you don't have legal expertise, you should kind of be able to understand all the things that are going on here. And it's a fascinating thing. It's kind of a scary thing. Because all of a sudden this movie could be, going through all sorts of turmoil, and Warner Brothers could be going through all sorts of turmoil. And I think what remains to be seen now is how big of an impact, a negative press impact, this has on the Superman movie, which had a lot of positive momentum going forward. I know all the little things about Superman's face and that TV spot and whatever, it doesn't matter. That really is inconsequential. This, though, could be very consequential. So this is something where we'll have to be continuing to monitor it, because it's going to be developing in one way or the other. How long? How much? We'll have to wait and see. Guys, what do you think about this? This is a crazy situation going on here where Superman and Warner Brothers are being sued because apparently the estate thinks that they have the right to, to be consulted before releasing the film in other territories. It's really interesting, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, sticking on the theme of releasing news literally the second I hit upload on the last episode. Again, this is probably going to be a little bit of an older piece of news, but still wanted to talk about it because this article here from The Hollywood Reporter has some interesting things to say about the fact that the Rey Skywalker movie has another writer. Now, if you guys haven't been following the saga of this Rey Skywalker movie, well, I mean, if you've been following the saga of any Star Wars movie in the past 5 years, which none of them have been released thus far, it's because they've all been basically following the same script, or the same two variations of one script. Option number one, movie gets announced or reportedly announced, basically all but confirmed, and then it gets canceled. Quietly or, quietly usually. They don't outright cancel these movies, but just quietly, it disappears. Option number two, which is the path that this Rey Skywalker movie seems to be taking, is that it is stuck in development purgatory forever, which means new writers, new directors, new directions, all sorts of random things, or delays, or production issues, or whatnot, and all these different things culminating. So, The Hollywood Reporter has just put out an article here saying that this Rey Skywalker movie, which actually this article has some interesting nuggets here, the first of which being, and I don't know if this is just The Hollywood Reporter saying this because they know something or just assuming that this is what it's called, but they have called this movie New Jedi Order, and they put it in italics and everything. It's, like they're actually referencing the title of this movie. Now, I've not heard this before, so if this had been announced somewhere, somebody please let me know. I looked up New Jedi Order into Google just to see, and it doesn't look like it's been officially, there's no Wikipedia article about it or anything like that. So Hollywood Reporter, I guess, announcing this movie's going to be called New Jedi Order, I guess? I don't know. These articles from Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, and Variety, they have a headline usually. And, the other day, we talked about the fact that Supergirl was going to be in Superman, but the headline itself was Supergirl's parents are being cast, which is fine and all. But usually the big pieces of information are just kind of hidden in here. So I don't know. Is this the case? Is it just, the sneaky announcement that this film is going to be called New Jedi Order, which, by the way, based on the production of this movie, could change in the next week. So who even knows about that? Anyways, so the film, we're going to call it New Jedi Order, has hired its, I think, third set of writers. And this guy in particular, the new writer, is George Nolfi. So George Nolfi is known for writing particularly The Bourne Ultimatum, part of the Bourne series with Matt Damon, and Ocean's 12, one of the more famous heist franchises in Hollywood. So there is that. That is sort of the basic news here. But then there are other, little nuggets here. First of all, it just kind of goes through the saga here of what's been going on here. And I think so they go through the order of the writers. The first writer that they hired was Damon Lindelof. And Damon Lindelof was best known for Watchmen and Lost. And so he was the first writer alongside with, I'm going to read, Justin Britt Gibson, I think, as well. He was alongside Damon Lindelof. They were the original writers. But then they were, announced to be writing a film. And then Daisy Ridley was on board. So I guess this was before we even knew what the film was going to be about. Then Daisy Ridley came on board and it was like, oh, okay, this is going to be a Rey Skywalker movie. Then those writers were out, Lindelof and Britt Gibson. And then Stephen Knight was hired to be the writer. And Stephen Knight, he was one of the writers, I think. I don't think he was the creator, but one of the writers for Peaky Blinders. And then by October 2024, and that's when, by the way, October 2024, I think, was when that big article came out about how Disney was so desperate to put Rey Skywalker and everything. We covered this on our channel, and you can go check that out in a previous segment. But yeah, so Stephen Knight, he was out in October 2024, and this film was again indefinitely delayed. And now we have another writer, George Nolfi, who, look, I mean, great. Hire a good writer. And it looks like, George Nolfi seems like a pretty good writer. I haven't seen The Bourne Ultimatum. I haven't seen Ocean's 12, but those are two successful franchises. I desperately hope those are not the most hated films in those particular sagas. But, what this article points out is that he's known for writing elevated thrillers. And so this might be an indication that this is the direction that Lucasfilm wants to go. Except Lucasfilm doesn't even know the direction Lucasfilm wants to go. So I don't know what to make of this on the surface other than just I'm going to assume he's going to be out in 6 months. And that's a really sad place to be. The other interesting things that are hidden in this article say that this film is going to be taking place 15 years after The Rise of Skywalker, and it's going to be about Rey training Jedi, which we knew. We knew that. But yeah, I mean, New Jedi Order, I guess, being the title, which again could change. This film being, taking place 15 years after The Rise of Skywalker, which could change, especially because there's a new writer. Like, George Nolfi can do whatever he wants. He apparently. And so, guys, look, I'm talking about this because, I mean, it's big news if it actually sticks, right? If it actually happens. But this is just the state of things with Star Wars movies. And look, I love Star Wars. I want nothing more than, every year to have a Star Wars movie. I think that would be awesome. And we're just not there yet. So it's eternally frustrating to hear this kind of stuff because it's just a reminder of how bad things have gotten. And let's just say this film is made, and let's just say that, George Nolfi sticks as the writer and Rey Skywalker, and it comes out. Great. But when? 2029? And so I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I'm hoping Mandalorian and Grogu is the start of just a successive train of Star Wars movies. We go Mandalorian and Grogu, we go Ryan Gosling and Sean Levy Star Wars movie. Maybe then 2028 we go Dawn of the Jedi, and then maybe 2029 we get this movie. I don't know. I really don't know what to make of this. Guys, what do you think about this? The fact that The Rise of Skywalker has its third writer or third, round of writers in about a year and a half. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about that. What do you guys think about that? And do you think that this film is actually going to, stick with this writer? Do you think this film is actually going to come out? Let me know in the comments down below. And everyone, that will do it for this week's episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, episode 63, and we got exciting things coming up, so make sure to stay tuned on the channel for all of the coverage that you guys are looking for. Make sure to subscribe, give the video a like on YouTube, make sure to leave a comment down below with any of your thoughts on the topics that we discussed today. If you're listening on audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Anchor, Overcast, anything that is audio only, thank you so much, and make sure to leave a rating. And guys, that will do it for me for this week, and I will see you guys in the next one.